Welcome to the Asian Tapestry. Chapter 3: The Cat and the Princess and the Silver Ring, Part 2. Hello and welcome to the Asian Tapestry, a podcast about myths, legends, and lore from Asia, structured in a book-like format called the Book of Fables. Before we start, I would like to just apologize for releasing this episode so late. It was actually supposed to come out on the 26th of May, but we had some serious internet issues, and then load shedding on top of that. In South Africa, we often have this thing called load shedding, which is where our electricity is cut across the country. This is done to reduce the strain on our electricity grid and our power stations, which are often breaking down. It's not uncommon for South Africans to go without electricity for 3 or more hours a day, and we've gotten so used to it that, for the first time, South Africa now has 2 time zones. While the UK has GMT and BST, South Africa has SAST, South African Standard Time, and LST, load shedding time. Our last chapter was called The Cat and the Princess and the Silver Ring, Part 1, a tale from India where a cat, a dog, and a snake prince befriend a young man after he is cast out by his own father. After a long journey and a visit to the Snake King, who gifts the young man with a magical ring, our hero, now a prince in his own right, and his 2 animal companions live happily in a grand castle accompanied by their new princess. Their happiness is soon destroyed when an evil ogress steals the princess and the castle away and casts all their lives into darkness. In today's chapter, we continue from where we left off. Will Cat and Dog rescue the princess? Is our hero doomed to eternal misery? And will Cat and Dog overcome their own rivalry and become the heroes their prince needs? Golden light streamed through the windows of the miserable prince as he lay sprawled upon his bed, his face streaked with tears. He had become thin, his skin a pasty brown, and his hair unkempt from weeks of neglect. The source of his unhappiness was the absence of the woman he loved. Ever since the prince had laid eyes on the golden hair, having floated downstream to his kingdom in a little reed, he could not stop thinking of her, and had grown ill with desire. Little did he know that not too far away, a large bee was buzzing its way towards his kingdom, a large ring held tight between its small legs. Soon the prince, lying in a haze of misery, heard a soft buzzing noise which slowly grew louder and louder until it sounded directly by his ear. He waved his hand weakly this way and that. "Whatever demon has come to reap my soul, let it be swift so that my misery may drag on no more," he moaned out, preparing himself for death. The bee, however, buzzed in irritation, and before the prince's eyes transformed into a large and burly ogre. The prince yelled out in shock as he stared at his ogress aunt, his mouth hanging open. "Shut your mouth before the flies decide to make it their new home, silly boy. Come, clean yourself up quickly. Your princess awaits," the ogress snapped, her bulbous face twisting into a smirk as the prince's eyes lit up, and life came back to his cheeks. In a flash, the prince rushed off to bathe himself, while the ogress went out to the palace gardens and awaited her nephew. Truth be told, the ogress did not go through all the trouble of obtaining the ring for her nephew out of the goodness of her heart. Oh well, of course she was fond of her nephew, but she also knew that the king had been extremely concerned for his son's health, and had almost given up on his heir. But now that she had restored his health and lineage, the king would be greatly indebted to his sister, who knew what riches and power she could squeeze out of him. Soon the prince, now transformed back to his former glory, appeared next to her and eagerly swiped the ring from her outstretched hand. The fine hair on the ogress's face bristled in anger at her nephew's impudence, but she forced her anger down knowing that soon she would have all the comforts and power in the world. Speaking frantically into the ring as instructed by his aunt, the prince watched in awe as a magnificent palace descended from the clouds and settled gently upon the land. Throwing the ring carelessly to the side, the prince ran into the palace, leaving his aunt to glare daggers in his direction. With a huff, she snatched up the ring and began to place it into her pocket, before pausing, as an idea came to her mind. Instead, she placed the ring into her mouth and swallowed it in one gulp. The princess of the palace, who had been sitting in her kitchen stool, one hand rubbing the finger upon which the magical ring had sat, startled as the desperate prince burst into the room. Falling immediately upon one knee, the prince declared his love for the princess and passionately asked for her hand in marriage. The princess gazed at him in shock and bewilderment, but a movement outside the window caught her eye. It was a large bee, its red eyes glinting maliciously at her. She let out a small gasp and instantly understood what had happened. Realizing that there was no true way out of it, the princess turned back to the prince and agreed to the marriage on one condition: that he wait a month for her, in which time she would have done the necessary prayers and arranged herself for marriage. The prince, so desperate was he to be with the woman he had desired for weeks now, agreed to her condition and left her in her palace. "Oh, my prince," the princess whispered as she stared sadly out of her bedroom window. "Hurry to me now." All the way back down the river, our prince and hero had returned from his meeting with the local townspeople, only to find, to his great horror and distress, that his palace and princess had vanished, and his friends cat and dog were nowhere to be seen. Falling to his knees, the prince felt a great darkness descend upon him, and heard his father's voice speak as if he stood next to him. "You will always be a failure, boy. Did you really expect anyone to be happy with you when every day they would be saving your pathetic hide?" He shuddered and drew from his pocket a sharp dagger. Suddenly his movements were stopped by a sharp bark, and he felt something butt against one hand, while teeth gently pressed against the other until he dropped the dagger. Blinking back his tears, the prince stared in shock and joy at his friends before him. "Dog! Cat! Oh, my friends, you returned for me!" he exclaimed with a sob, throwing his arms around them. Cat purred against his chest, while Dog snuffled his ear, the warm air tickling him gently. "We would never abandon you, master," Dog said gruffly, licking the prince's cheek. "I mean, let's be honest, you wouldn't last long without us," Cat said with a smirk. "Or at least you wouldn't last long without me. Not entirely sure what Dog really does here," she added with a small snigger. Dog tried to nip at Cat, but she slipped out of reach just in time. The prince smiled at his two friends, his heart glowing with love and gratitude. "Your princess did not leave you, brave boy. She was stolen from you by an evil ogress," Cat explained, her paw resting gently on the kneeling man's chest. The prince's face fell, and then grew dark. "Then I'll go at once and get her back. I'll fight however many men I need to. He was cut off by a gentle but firm paw. Cat sighed as she held her paw against her prince's mouth. "That's all very well, my boy, but I think a subtler approach would be best here," she said. Dog barked in excitement. "Yes, I will. We will," Cat corrected him, her tail swatting Dog's nose. Dog suppressed a sneeze and scowled at his feline companion. "Yes, that's what I meant." "Achoo!" "We will bring back the princess, master," he continued, placing his paws gently on the prince's shoulders. The prince felt a tear run down his face and ruffled Dog's ears. "Thank you, my friends. I can never repay you. May God speed your journey." And with those words, the prince let them go, having given them gifts to bless their journey. A red cloth from the prince's own cloak, which he placed gently around Dog's neck, and fastened with a golden clip to protect him from the cold, and for Cat a leather pouch filled with meaty treats to stave off their hunger. Then Cat and Dog bounded off as fast as they could. They ran and ran and ran, never pausing, even though Cat was thirsty and Dog hungry. At last they arrived at the neighboring kingdom, and immediately saw the stolen palace. Said Cat. We'll have to gain access to the house and speak with the princess first. She can tell us more about this prince and where the ring is." Dog nodded in agreement. "I think I can give you a boost up into that window, and from there you can make your way to the mistress," he said, one ear flicking up as he listened to the noises around them. Palace servants and guards were busy preparing for the upcoming wedding, and barely spared a glance towards the two animals. Cat paled. "Excuse me?" Cat said. "You want me to climb onto your smelly, unkempt fur?" "No, thank you," she continued with a haughty sniff, turning her face to the side in disgust. Dog rolled his eyes, and before Cat could blink, grabbed the feline by her scruff and bounded towards the window, throwing her up and in through the window with a mighty swing. He watched as Cat landed on all four paws on a dresser, her tail puffed up and eyes as wide as saucers. She spluttered. "Why on earth would you do that, you crazy, disgusting furball?" she yelled out as she glared down at Dog. Dog just grinned and barked cheekily back at her. Cat shook herself, hissing softly as she dropped down to the ground and headed towards the princess's room. As soon as the princess saw Cat, she quickly explained what had happened and the time limit she had negotiated. Cat sat and thought for a while. "We must get the magical ring. That is the only way to avoid a great conflict and show this kingdom that they should not have challenged us." "Where is it?" she asked. The princess's face fell. "In the ogress's stomach." Now, as it happened, while the palace and village community were busying themselves with wedding preparations, far beneath the prince's room, an entirely different community were preparing themselves for the exact same thing. There was to be a great wedding amongst the rat royalty that day, and the son of the king of the rats was preparing himself for his big day. Now Cat, with her keen sense of hearing, heard whispers and murmurs of this as she wandered around on the walls of the palace. With a sharp hiss, she called to Dog, who had been waiting rather impatiently for her. "Geez, I thought cats were supposed to be swift creatures, yet you walk at the speed of a drugged elephant, my feline friend." Dog huffed out at her as he bounded up to the wall. Cat swiped some dust into his face in retaliation, smirking as he pawed at his face in annoyance. "Hush now, my idiotic oaf. Here is the plan," she said, and told him the idea she had thought up while scouting the palace. Dog reluctantly agreed that her plan was a good one, being unable to think of a better one himself, not that he would ever admit that. So he made his way along the boundary wall, nose to the ground as he searched. Soon his nose caught the very distinct smell of a rat. There was a hole at the base of the wall, and Cat soon joined him and peeked through, watching as many rats dressed in fine wear bustled this way and that. Dog panted in excitement. "Right, let's go get 'em," he whispered enthusiastically. Cat blinked up at him. I don't know about you, Dog, but that hole looks like a rat-shaped hole to me. So what exactly is your brilliant plan to get to the Prince of Rats?" she asked with disdain. Dog opened his mouth, and then, thinking better of it, closed it again. I don't know," he mumbled. Cat smirked and calmly licked her paw, swiping it gently over her face. Now, my dear slobbering mutt. All we have to do is wait," she said, with a sly smile. Dog huffed impatiently. "Can you at least pass the treats, then?" "His esteemed Majesty, Prince Rashid of the Great Rat Kingdom." Cat winced as processional music blared out from the hole, and gazing out from their hiding place, they saw a stream of rats emerging slowly and steadily from the hole. Some wore rich silk, others wore brightly coloured clothes inlaid with gold. Then at last, a tall rat, his coat gleaming with oil, strode out, and atop his head sat a large red turban with gold jewellery draped all over it. Cat licked her lips, and with a mighty pounce trapped the rat prince between her two paws. The procession abruptly stopped playing their music, and the royal family began shouting, some in anger, while others dropped to their knees and pleaded with Cat. "How dare you unhand the prince? Please, it's his wedding day." Cat frowned at all the shouting, and tried to quiet them to no avail. Suddenly, a loud and frustrated bark echoed through the gathering. Dog stood angrily over them all, his formidable bulk casting a shadow so large that it enveloped the entire party. "All of you shut up. Occasionally Cat says something smart, and this just happens to be one of those times. So everyone, keep quiet," he growled out, making all the rats waltz where they stood. Cat wasn't sure how to react to that. Thank you, Dog, for that rather backhanded compliment. Now, as I was trying to say, I will let your prince live to see his wedding day if you do something in return for us," Cat said slyly, green eyes glittering as the rats shivered in fear. Anything you want, mighty Cat," the king of the rats exclaimed. He could not bear to see his only heir crushed beneath a cat's paw, of all things. Cat smiled, her sharp teeth glinting. "Excellent. Now, this is what I need you to do. There's an ogress in this palace who has swallowed a ring. I need you to get it for me. Simple." The king of the rats gaped for a few moments, before nodding weakly. That night, a stroke away from midnight, the king of the rats crept in through the window of the ogress's room and scurried onto her rising chest. Pausing to check that she was still asleep, the king crawled onto her face, and with a visible gag, dropped his tail into her open mouth as she snored. The ogress took a deep breath, and then began violently coughing. She coughed and coughed until with a very large hack, the magical ring came flying out and onto the floor. The king of the rats quickly leapt off the ogress and, snatching up the ring between his paws, darted out of the window and back to his people. He presented the ring to Cat, who nodded at Dog to take it. Dog screwed up his nose. "Oh, very nice. So I must hold the spit-covered ring, thanks a lot. What an honor. Oh, yes." "Oh, do shut up and take the ring," Cat snapped. "Do you want her boy to get his princess back or not?" she asked, flicking her tail in irritation. Dog scowled back at her, but gingerly took the ring between his teeth, violently shaking it so that the spit flew off the ring and onto Cat's face. She hissed and frantically began cleaning herself, while Dog sniggered, the ring gleaming in the moonlight. Soon they were off again, heading back to the prince, their spirits high. Then they came to a large, shallow river. Cat dipped her paw in and then shook it with disgust. "I cannot cross this river. It is far too deep," she said with a frown. "I suppose I'll have to ride across your mangy back after all," she added. Dog rolled his eyes at her and shook himself, his entire body bristling as he shook first his head, then his body, and finally his thick tail, which lazily whacked Cat in her face, much to her annoyance. With a joyful bark, Dog jumped into the river. "Come on then, hop on, kitten," he said with a cheeky grin. Cat narrowed her eyes at her canine companion before leaping nimbly onto his large back. "Very well, let us go. And first give me the ring, or else you'll drop it from your careless teeth as we cross," Cat said. Dog huffed in indignation as he started walking. "I will not. I'll have you know that I'm an extremely careful and a strong swimmer. Why, when I was a pup, I once crossed a—" Uh-oh. He broke off abruptly and came to a stop in the middle of the river. Cat, who had been staring at the stars above, intent on ignoring Dog, quickly looked down. "What did you do?" she asked in horror, as she watched the ring float downstream, where a large fish swallowed it with a satisfied gulp. Dog paled. I dropped it," he said, with a nervous laugh. Cat swatted Dog across the ears, causing him to let out a pitiful yelp. Don't hit me. If you hadn't kept insulting me, I wouldn't have been talking in the first place, Dog protested. Cat gaped down at him. Are you seriously trying to put this on me right now? This is all because of your big mouth. Cat yowled back at him. The hackles were raised as they stood, Dog twisting his head up as much as he could to glare at her, while Cat scowled down at him. After a few moments of this, both animals shook themselves and sighed. All right, well, let's just fix this problem and get on with it, Cat said, one paw massaging the side of her head. Our boy is relying on us. Let's quickly cross, and then you go bring me a sheep, she added. Dog frowned, but did as Cat said, returning soon with a dead sheep between his jaws. He dumped it at her paws and spat out wool in disgust. Blech. I don't know why humans like eating these creatures so much. They're so revolting. Cat ignored him, and making a quick incision in the sheep's stomach, began to crawl inside the sheep, much to Dog's horror. Cat, are you quite well? Have you lost your mind? I mean, I always knew you were crazy, but this is an entirely new level. Shush! Cat hissed out at him. Go hide somewhere. Don't come out until I tell you to, she said, her eyes gleaming. Dog huffed, but did as she said. Soon a great bird called a nadar, who possessed the ability to break the bones of a fish with just its gaze, swooped down and landed on the sheep, intent on carrying it away. Before it could twitch a feather, Cat was upon it, one paw on its neck, the other pressing against its right wing as she held it onto the ground. Now, listen very carefully, my feathery friend, Cat began. You are going to go to the kingdom of the fish and ask for an audience with the king. She paused to allow the bird to nod its head in agreement, which it did, rather frantically. Then you're going to demand that he make inquiries throughout his realm for a fish who swallowed a ring. She paused again. The bird nodded as much as it could with a large paw on its throat. Good, Cat continued. Then you're going to get the ring from said fish and bring it back to me. Within 2 hours, if you can. If you don't, I'll find your nest and destroy your unborn children, she added with a low hiss. Dog, who had by now returned from his hiding place, felt his hair stand up. Cat really could be scary when she wanted to. The bird gulped and flew up and away as soon as Cat released it. Within 2 hours, the ring was back safely between Cat's teeth. Now, Cat said as they continued on their way, I will keep the ring since, as I have said in the first place, you are too clumsy to keep it safe, she said with a sneer in Dog's direction. Dog snarled back at her, but said nothing, ashamed that he had put his master's happiness at risk. They were almost halfway across the kingdom, when Cat suddenly spied a mouse emerging from the grass. She felt her hunting instincts activate, her eyes narrowing and her tail stiffening. And before she could even realize what she was doing, Cat dove after the mouse, disappearing into the long grass even as Dog frantically barked after her. Cat, no! The ring, you fool! He barked, dashing into the grass and looking around wildly. Cat soon emerged, a triumphant grin upon her face as she dangled a mouse between her teeth. Cat 1, mouse 0, she said with a chuckle, dropping the mouse onto the ground and instantly pouncing on it as it tried to flee. Dog let out an angry growl. Cat, you idiot, where's the ring? He shouted at her, looking around at the ground. Cat paled and gasped. What have I done? She murmured, joining Dog as they both sifted through the long grass for the magical ring. Seeing that the two predators were otherwise occupied, the little mouse made a quick exit. And I'm the clumsy one, Dog barked out in fury. At least I didn't let my primal instincts get the better of me. How barbaric, he added, with a haughty huff. Cat bristled, but knew that Dog was right. Her ears drew back in shame, and her tail went limp. Dog saw how miserable Cat looked, and felt a twinge of pity. All right, let's just try to get the ring back, Dog said with a heavy sigh, his gaze wandering up. There, he said, with a sudden bark. In the sky. A kite has caught our ring in its talons, he said, jumping in excitement. Cat instantly tracked the bird across the sky as it flew over them and settled in a tree a little way away. Get up that tree and kill that bird, he ordered. Cat didn't protest. Moving quickly but without a sound, she climbed up the tree and stalked the bird as it examined the glittering ring in its talons. She was just behind it, ready to pounce, when a leaf fell from a branch above and drifted past the kite. making it turn its head towards the movement, one beady eye spotting Cat. With a great shriek, the kite took to the air, but not before Cat leapt and ripped her claws right through its right wing, sending it tumbling down to the ground, right towards Dog's waiting jaws. Dog took the ring gingerly between his teeth and placed it between them on the grass. They both stared at it, and then at each other, shame and guilt etched upon their faces. "You know, we made a great team there, taking down that bird," Dog said, leaning to one side so that he could scratch his ear with his back paw. Cat let out a small sigh. "Yeah, I guess we did," she said, licking her paw and spitting out a stray feather. A few more moments of awkward silence stretched between the two, before Cat extended a paw. "Shall we call it a truce and get this blasted ring back to our boy?" she asked, a small smile on her face. Dog's ears twitched up, and his tail gave a small wag as he met her paw with his. "Truce." With those words, Cat removed the golden clip which held Dog's red cloak, while Dog picked up the ring and slipped it into Cat's leather pouch. Cat then clipped the pouch securely to the cloak and tied the cloak back onto Dog's back. "All right," Dog said, stretching his limbs. "Hop on, Cat. It's the last leg of the journey, and I'm gonna race it," he growled out, a determined expression upon his face. Cat grinned and nightly leapt onto his back, steadying herself as her companion leapt into a full bound, leaving the dust to settle behind them. They soon arrived without incident back to the prince, who was sitting anxiously in a makeshift enclosure. Rushing out to greet them, he kissed them both many times atop their heads, happy to see that they were unharmed. They presented him with the magical ring, and watched as the prince spoke into it, and waited as his palace slowly began to appear before them. With a great cry of happiness, the princess threw open the door and ran into her prince's arms, laughing with delight as he swung her around, dropping kisses to her cheeks. Dog let out a happy bark, his tail thumping furiously behind him, while Cat watched on beside him, a contented look in her green eyes. "All in all, a good day's work, don't you think, my feline friend?" Dog said, as they left their human companions to each other. Cat grinned, her tail lazily waving back and forth. "Not bad at all, my canine companion. Not bad at all." And so ends Chapter 3, The Cat and the Princess and the Silver Ring, Part 2. As always, but even more so in this chapter, I have made this folktale my own, keeping the overarching storyline, but embellishing, adding, changing, and creating many more scenes, interactions, and characterizations. For example, I changed the relationship between Dog and Cat quite radically from the text by Joseph Jacobs. Originally, Dog was to blame for all of the mishaps with the ring, as he kept losing it, but having my own fur babies, I couldn't have such an uneven story. So I changed it so that both Dog and Cat were at fault for losing the ring, but that these mishaps taught them that working together was better than against each other. I added the bits about the prince's gifts to Cat and Dog, so that I could create the scene where Cat and Dog safely store the ring in the pouch and secure it onto Dog. I changed almost all of the dialogue and fleshed out all of the scenes, including those between the rival prince and the ogress. However, the overarching plot, the core characters, scenes, and chronology remain the same. I hope that I still captured the magic of the original tale. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 3, Part 2 of the Book of Fables. I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed this tale, and you join me once more for Chapter 4. If you like what you hear, please take a few minutes to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you can leave reviews, and subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at AsianTapestry1 and email me at theasiantapestrypod@gmail.com. This podcast is a proud member of the Straight Up Strange network, and please check us out via the link in the show notes. Intro music was Jalandhar by Kevin MacLeod, and outro music is Raga, Dance of Music by Akash Gandhi. Further details, including license information, may be found in the show notes. I have been your host, the Shirapada, and you've been listening to The Asian Tapestry.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.